go. Welcome, everyone. Thirsty Thursday. No alcohol here. We've got a little chestnut from Australia month. But thanks for tuning in. Rest in peace, Vyleen White, lady stabbed in Ipswich. I'm from Ipswich, so I was lucky enough to be able to actually get down there. I can see where this whole scene happened. I spoke to locals. There was like a flower monument. I approached a lady who was crying. They just came from the family's home, just seen the little girl. So this is like full on, crazy. I don't live too far from the area, and I've got lots of family and friends who shop at this shopping center. So it could have been someone I love. We've got guests on tonight: Gabriel, Mare, John Lawson, both blokes who I think have a great insight to, I think, speaking actually the truth, you know what I mean? Being honest and frank, which is something why I think this country has gone in a bad direction, because we haven't been honest enough to say the truth of what's going on, what the current situation is. So welcome. Thanks for coming on, lads. John's joining us through audio.
Thanks for having us, Dusty.
Thanks, Dusty. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, no worries. And I guess it's sort of like, we've all heard about specifically the Sudanese crime waves, in particular down in Melbourne, Victoria. You know what I mean? And we've seen an increase of African immigration to Ipswich. And you kind of think like, I go to church with these people. You don't think that this sort of I think it's the African American kind of gang rap culture seeps in with the youth. And it's like, you know what I mean? And the African community has got a real big problem wherever they are. It seems that gang violence, extreme violence takes place. It's not good. It makes you wake up to maybe, you hear it from Melbourne, you hear it from America, like the African Americans have a real bad reputation. And then you're like, whoa, that shit seems for real. Now,
it's unfortunate, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah. It's shockingly true. And, as much as you sort of want to, you don't want it to be true, and you think, oh, these are lovely people, I go to church with them, whatever. And then it's like, bang, when these incidents happen, it's like, wow, you see the people, mainly Americans, posting about it, and they have a lot of crime statistics, maybe like a lower IQ or some, there are statistical kind of points commonly pointed out at the African community, and then you kind of I brushed it off, didn't want to go there. And then times like now, it's the wake up call, and you go, unfortunately, it seems that there is a case in the arguments. It seems there's probably a strong case there, against the African community.
Well, I think many Aussies are very upstanding people. They go to work, they mind their own business, they stay in their lane, and they don't really have an experience with this sort of crime in their daily life, this sort of violence, and they sort of see it as something that happens somewhere else. And because they don't interact with these kind of occurrences on a daily basis or regularly, and they don't hear it in the news as much, they sort of assume everyone's like them and their family, and that everyone sort of just wants to get along. And at the end of the day, they can shake hands if there's a disagreement, and look each other in the eye and be mates and not have a problem. But the reality is, and people need to accept this, is that not all populations are like Aussies. Not everyone is exactly the same. And when you're inviting in people from the third world, you're also bringing in with them third world behavior, unfortunately. And Australia doesn't have magic dirt, doesn't have magic soil. When you step off the plane and get your piece of paper to become an Australian citizen, you don't magically lose all the characteristics that made your country what it is, thanks to the population's behavior. And it's unfortunate that I don't think many people will come around to this point of view until these sort of incidents become a much more regular occurrence. But even then, as we've seen in other countries, people do want to turn a blind eye to it because it's very, very uncomfortable to tackle with these ideas that not everyone is as nice and friendly and helpful and good-natured as the average Aussie or the average, Englishman in England or the average American in America, because this is really a global trend. But it's going to require people to put on their big boy pants and really face this unfortunate angle of human nature from a realistic point of view, from what we can actually observe and not what their wishful thinking leads them to believe.
Yeah. If we keep putting our heads in the sand, we are just gonna actually have a hell of a lot worse of a problem as the demographic grows. You'll get the critical race theory, typical Black Lives Matter weaponization of critical gender theory against our population, and it would just be an absolute disaster. Like right now, there is a low African community in Australia, and I think like what we could think of is what can Australia do right now. We need to look at the crime stats, say, look, I'm all for net zero, no more immigration. That's what I believe. I think we should be following. I think One Nation has a good policy. The Sustainable Australia Party which is more of a left-wing party. They have a good policy on net zero immigration. That would be my straightaway position, and you would totally minimize any future problems growing by adopting net zero. Unfortunately, I would say we have to at least talk about where are the crime stats racially coming from certain parts of the world, nations. And then we need to really say, like, statistically, they tell me, trust the science. Well, a statistical analysis of the data is not lying. And we know this, you know what I mean? And then we have to say, well, right, minimize immigration. But, what other kind of changes do you guys think would be appropriate?
I'll maybe let Gabe dive into some of the solutions that he considers, but I think it might be worth recounting before we really get too far into the episode, the actual events that occurred in Ipswich this last Saturday. If that's okay with you guys, I might as well just recount those details very quickly. So this 70-year-old woman, Vyleen White, she was at the shopping centre near Dusty that he described visiting somewhat frequently. And she was in a car park with her 6-year-old granddaughter when she was approached by a young Sudanese man. I believe he was 16 years old. I didn't double check that. And he actually asked for her keys to carjack her, to steal her car. And even though she complied with this, he ended up stabbing her, maybe to get rid of the witness or maybe just out of cruelty itself. But he ended up stabbing her, which led to her death. She was a very old woman, and it's a horrendously violent crime. And she's died from that wound. Since then, it turns out that there were 4 other Sudanese boys that were also accomplices in this crime. And I'll let the other guys give their commentary, but I think it's very, very, very interesting to note, and this isn't often the case with these sort of crimes and stabbings and murders, but the 5 Sudanese boys were actually private school educated, which shows that they weren't from this disprivileged background. They weren't carjacking to feed their family or something like that, which you often hear from American leftists. They'll see some horrible crime, or they'll see something like petty theft happening all across America from the African American community, and they'll excuse it as it's a result of socio-economic circumstances because they can't feed their family. They're stealing, and they're using this to sort of a Robin Hood attempt to look after their people because otherwise they're going to starve. Clearly, if you're going to a private school, the Sudanese boys who has been arrested, his mother says, he was raised in a good family. I don't know how true that was, but it could have been the case. And it certainly sounds like he wasn't starving or doing this for any other motive. He wasn't desperate, basically. And also it means that he didn't come from a youth of, struggling to scrape by and having no resources. So it really rules out that angle.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys jump in a moment, but I think it's worth noting whenever they say, why are the African-American crime statistics so high? For example, FBI crime data says every year that the African-American community, which is only 13% of the population, commits over 50% of all the crimes in America. So vastly, vastly overrepresented, especially in violent crime. And so the American left will say, well, this is, of course, due to slavery and the legacy of Jim Crow, and because of segregation, and because of all these things, it's left a generational impact on African Americans, which is dragging them down and forcing them into this grinding poverty, which is causing them to cause these crimes. And then we look at Africa, where we see a very similar sort of circumstance, where there's constant warring, there's constant unsettlement, regime change, poverty, murder, and rape, all these other crimes, right? And of course, they attribute this, leftists worldwide will attribute this to colonization. And in South Africa, they say it's apartheid. It's a legacy of colonization and apartheid that has caused these terrible conditions in Africa. Then you look at Australia and they'll say that the Aboriginal community is unfortunately very poor and also criminal in much a similar way to the African populations in the two previous, in America and in the continent of Africa as well. And they'll say that this is because of colonization and the stolen generation. So they'll have these reasons behind this remarkably similar trend across all these countries. And then it comes to the Sudanese community in Australia, which these 5 boys came from. And it comes to the African community in Britain, or I think it's a mixture of different African ethnicities in Britain, which form a large minority. And both of these populations are drastically overrepresented in crime. I know that the Sudan, I think crimes committed by Sudanese are 7 times that committed by other groups. You can maybe show that statistic up on the screen, Dusty. If you go to Flynn Holman on X, I believe he shared the chart. I might have also shared that somewhere in my timeline. I'll let you try and find it. But
Yep.
I believe it's at least 7 times that of the rest of Australia in terms of violent crime or arrests for violent crime. And so you can't attribute this to colonization. You can't attribute this to stolen generation or to segregation or anything like this, because they've arrived in Australia as refugees or as migrants, and they've received a public school education at minimum. They've received, charitable donations of food and government subsidized housing at minimum. So they've got all these base material things looked after, and yet we have this wildly disproportionate crime rate, which would lead, I think, any reasonable person to say that actually it's something consistent to this group. It's not they're not for some reason pursued and discriminated against in every single country that they go to, and this is why they are behaving this way. It must actually be a common factor across this population everywhere in the world. And although it's very controversial to say, it is absolutely essential to understand that the Sudanese IQ, the average IQ in Sudan is quite a bit lower than that of Australia and of other Western nations, white nations, and also of Asian nations. And as you might be able to infer or understand, anyone listening, is that IQ is actually very related to crime. And because somebody might not be able to understand properly or to find a way to express themselves in a civilized, productive way, because they simply cannot understand how society functions. Maybe, Dusty, you can try pulling up some stats for the average IQ in Sudan compared to some other countries. If you look up IQ World Map, I think that gives a good idea, because you see these trends across where pretty much any country with a lower IQ is going to have a higher crime rate. Once again, people can say correlation does not equal causation, but I think when you're looking at a pattern that strong, where IQ is actually far more correlated with crime than poverty is, you can say that clearly there is a relation between the two that isn't coincidental, and it's not a matter of white people holding them down or something like that. When the Sudanese community in Australia has received everything that they could ask for as bare minimum needs, and yet we still see these crimes being committed against Aussies. So I'll pass it over to you guys. I have a bit more to say, but I'll let you talk. Gabe, it might be worth mentioning, have you seen the Guardian's reaction to these crimes? Did you see the article that they wrote about how the Sudanese community is being affected by this?
Yeah, I did. I saw that post on X. But I guess before we quickly, or before we go into it, I just want to quickly mention that, yeah, like these minority groups in Western countries, they like to use excuses like John just mentioned, like, oh, we've been discriminated against. Oh, we have this history and white people treated us bad. But then you go to their own country in Africa, whether it be in Sudan, North Africa, Morocco, Egypt, South Africa, the way they behave in those countries, it's absolutely appalling. And it's simply a reflection of what they're doing in our own countries, in our own cities, in our own towns and neighborhoods to themselves sometimes and to other white people, mainly white people. And, you know, they'll say things like that. Oh, we're being discriminated against, but they're not being discriminated in the, you know, in their own home country. They're not. So that excuse is ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely retarded. You know, look at the horrible crimes they have done against, I don't know, South African farmers in South Africa. There's horrible stories, like, you know, stories of rape, where 50 men will gather around a white farmer's home and rape every single member of the family in front of the father, shoot the kids and the parents. Sorry, not the parents, the wife, in front of the father while he's still alive, and then shoot him. You know, like these horrible crimes you see all around the world. I was browsing through X the other day, and I saw this story of I know they're not South Sudanese or anything, but you know it still relates. Well, it's still, you know, within the African continent. I mean, you know, going up north. I think it was 7 Egyptian men. They raped a 13-year-old Italian girl in Catania, I think it's Sicily, in front of her boyfriend. Now they held her boyfriend back and they viciously raped her, all 7 of them. And he witnessed that. And, you know, you see that same story playing out. They can say, you know, very easily, oh, we've been discriminated against. But once again, you're seeing stories in their own home country. You know, the same stories repeating time and time again against themselves and other, you know, minority groups like white people that have been there for hundreds of years, for most. And then, you know, and then they'll go on with the excuses. They'll say, oh, but white people colonized Africa. That's why they're acting like that. You know, they've taken our resources, they've taken everything from us, and we're left with nothing. What are we going to do? It's your fault. It's a white man's fault. They'll say things like that. But then you look towards Europe, okay? Europe experienced a lot of wars, a lot of hardship, a lot of pain. Look at World War II. World War II left, you know, Italy and Germany completely destroyed. And I know they still haven't fully recovered, obviously, but they have built themselves up from that moment in history to what it is now. They still have buildings, they still have cars, they've produced beautiful machinery. They have picked themselves up, you know, from their you know, the darkest point in history where German women were raped as well by the Soviet soldiers, and you know, all these other people. They experienced the same sort of hardship, if not worse, than these South Africans that may have, you know, gone under colonization, which most of the times over exaggerated. But you know, it really begs the question: if it's not colonization, if it's not, you know, white people, and you know, all the excuses they use, like discrimination, it has to be something else. It's something much deeper than that. And I think John hit the nail on the head. You know, when he mentioned you know, IQ, you know, intelligence. You know, they tend to act in a very impulsive manner without thinking, with no thought of the consequences of their crimes. You know, like for example, even this story here is a perfect example. Why did he stab the woman for? She gave him the keys to the car, but but he still stabbed her. Why? He probably had this impulsive feeling, this urge to stick that blade into this poor old woman's body for no apparent reason, because he had the keys, he had what he wanted, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think this just proves it again.
Here's the IQ. I've just Googled the World Population Review.com average IQ by country. South Sudan is, it's low 40s. There is a few countries that have they're saying the average IQ is Liberia. Wow, I can't believe that. South Sudan they're saying an IQ of 58.6.
Yeah, that does seem a little bit low. I have heard the numbers being a little bit higher than that, but I'm not sure. Maybe they're using a different test. What's the average in Australia?
I know Gavin McInnes, my boss at Sensor TV, he often quotes something. There's the US military does IQ tests, and it's they won't allow you into the military if you have an IQ lower than 80. So they're saying there's no job in the military for you. So it's, this is the standard of, it's sort of I guess militaries around the world will have long-term data for a long set of time, and they'll work out what's going on. But yeah, this is disgusting. Australia's average IQ is 99.24. That's what they're saying. So we're sort of on par with, say, China. China's got 104 IQ.
Yeah.
Japan's 106. America's 97. We're slightly smarter than the Americans. The Kiwis are.
I hope they're lower than us.
Bloody Kiwis. Yeah, they're just below 98.
Let's go. Oh, wait. Let's go.
I've heard the Irish had a lower IQ. 95. There you go. So,
yeah.
It's,
I think obviously wrote an article
there's correlation, isn't there? There's direct correlation. You can see, I would say that the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans, you can clearly see on the map, they've done better. And, this is obviously a part of I believe God created us all, but, evolution is also a part of, there is something there about breeding patterns of, and especially with inbreeding, they say that people who do inbreeding. So whatever, once we understand the real problem, you can come up with some real solutions. Number one solution would be, we can see a higher crime rate from these people that are lower IQ. Number one, don't let them in the country. They shouldn't be allowed in. We need to.
Dusty, can you remember maybe when you were just starting out in politics? Do you remember the reaction against Sudanese crime? I think maybe a decade ago, and Peter Dutton came out and made a comment about it. Even he was talking about African gangs. And I think this might have been when social media was a little bit younger, more in its infancy, and people on Twitter were talking about how, we're not a gang, we're just individual Africans. You're calling all of us criminals and stuff like that. And I don't know, do you remember that occurrence?
Oh, I probably don't remember that occurrence, but it seems like this conversation has been, this similar things have been said for a long time now,
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the thing, nothing ever changes, because if you even talk about if you pull up that website and you talk about this clear pattern, then you'll be shouted out of the conversation. And we've seen that even with academics all around the world who talk about this IQ disparity. They're called racist, of course. Even though they're looking at numbers on a chart at the data, and what they're saying is really irrefutable. The best I've ever heard. People try to knock it down by saying, well, the IQ measurement is useless and it favors whites. But of course, we know that IQ tests can be administered using things as simple as patterns and non-cultural elements involving maths. and yet we still see the same results. When you administer the American SAT test, which is their equivalent of the HSC here in Australia, then they also discover a similar disparity among different ethnic groups. And of course, their SAT is much more like an IQ test than our HSC is. So its result is more of a measurement of that. And we can also look at how IQ tests actually align quite well with job performance and actual earnings. So it has predictive value. It is a useful test for that purpose. Clearly, it is picking up something when that test shows a different score. It's not completely arbitrary. So I think if we recognize these things rather than casting them aside as racist, as I think a lot of our instinct was, I think Gabe and I and maybe Dusty, we can remember a time before we'd learnt about all these facts, and maybe we'd wonder about why the world was like this. Why is there crime in the first place? Why is there suffering, and all of these questions? But when you learn these answers, at first it's very, very difficult to swallow, I think. But if you really do approach the data in a calm, calculated way, and if you have a look at patterns and really use your mind, you can see, try and strip away all bias. You can really start to see that what we're saying actually is really the only explanation, that different populations are different, and that when you bring a different demographic, a different population into Australia, they don't suddenly magically become 100% identical to Australians when they get their name on that piece of paper, on their citizenship. They actually remain, they remain who they were when they were on different soil. We don't live in a magic world. I'll pass it back to you guys soon, but I know you wanted to talk about some of the solutions, Dusty, and of course, ending immigration is essential. But from my recent conversations with people such as Martin from the Sustainable Population Australia Institute, which is an environmental organisation barracking for lower immigration, and when I talk to other people, they often say that the real impediment to lowering immigration is that people feel that it is racist to suggest such a thing, and they feel that racism is evil and wrong and all these things. And this really comes from this multicultural ideology, which has completely permeated Australian society ever since really the late 1960s or mid 1960s. And so even though a majority of the population is in favour of immigration restriction, right? They keep doing polls year after year and decade after decade, and it keeps revealing that a majority of Australians are in favour of some form of immigration restriction, whether that be capping it at COVID levels or, we need a reduction or something like that. And so these people, obviously, a majority of Australians still have within their mind some resistance to this multicultural agenda and ideology, but it is thoroughly useful to the business and political elite. So for Labor, when they see these disprivileged communities and refugees and immigrant groups, what they're really seeing is they're seeing a lot more votes for them, and this is true of the Democrats in America, where they can see that that by bringing in these people, they feel some sense of owing to the Labor Party, and so they're winning more votes that way, and they're shifting things irreparably towards them so that no other party can win. And then when the Liberals look at them, they see that their lobbyists' interests are represented by these immigrants and by this maintaining a high level of immigration. Why? Because some of their lobbies are the big businesses and also the property lobby. These are very influential lobbies within the Liberal Party. And of course, these two lobbies actually have a lot of interest in keeping immigration high, because of course, for the property lobby to correctly represent its constituents, that is property developers and investors, what they want is to have a constantly growing population, which means infinite customers for their product. And so this is also true if you look at the business lobby, which they really want to keep wages low. And so by bringing in an infinite labor pool, they can also, obviously it won't lower below minimum wage because of legal protections, but they can really lower the wage as much as possible to that point. And so they have a vested interest in maintaining the multicultural ideology, which allows immigration to be forced upon the population, and for them to morally assent to it or be scared to criticize it. And of course, the media as well. They see they see through their ideological lens that they learn in universities, that they learn in high school and on the internet as well. We can see that a lot of our media elite are ideologically very much opposed to the traditional Anglo-Celtic, European, Australian nation. And so they would like to see us turn into this multicultural stirring pot. So really what we find is that this multicultural ideology is completely undergirds this whole immigration system, which without it, one 70-year-old grandma would still be alive today. And how many young women would have not been raped had we not brought in these aggressive foreign populations? And how many murders would have been prevented had we not had infinite immigration over the last 30 years, constantly expanding from third world countries where their crime rate is absolutely disgusting? These are the things that we should be taking into account. And so when Gabe, myself, when Dusty, when we advocate for zero net immigration, this might sound like a completely radical proposal, and it might sound like we're uncaring for poorer populations from Africa, from Sudan. But really, I think we can see that it comes from a place of really caring for our fellow Australian and for wanting the best for our country. We don't want to see any more of our countrymen. We don't want to see another Vyleen White stabbed to death in a car park because the individual, the Sudanese man, wanted to prove that he was a tough guy and that he could, run someone through with a knife, an old lady through with a knife to impress his peers. I'll pass it back over to you guys, but this is why I'd be in favor of immigration restriction, and really for the purposes of maintaining our demographic, white, Anglo-Celtic, European core demographic within Australia.
Absolutely. Like, we're at a point where now, I think right now in Australia, we can see there's a housing crisis, a homeless crisis, a youth crime crisis, inflation. They've just pumped in 730,000 immigrants into the country. And, they're artificially keeping the country out of a recession through, bringing in extra consumers. I wouldn't be surprised if, the Labor's agenda is to fast track citizenship for these people and then replacement voting so they can guarantee, a future of inevitable left-wing governments. But it's not working. And we can see right now this violent attack, people are waking up. This is a point where people are really waking up. And I think we're normalizing conversations where in the past people were afraid to have and speak up about. Even myself, I brushed off a lot of this personally, and I thought, that's just whatever, American, statistical whatever. And then once it's in your backyard and, you're seeing the people, you're seeing the community, and everyone I spoke to when I went down to the local shops, everyone I spoke to, even migrants, even Pacific Islanders and young African lady and a Pacific Islander lady were like, yes, this culture is these young men, African young men, they pretty much like named it, called it out. So what more can we do? What more can we do other than say 100% put the brakes on? We have to look at things statistically, mathematically, and we have to say, what is the best for our community? What's the best for our people? And we have to, that in itself is colorblind. Like, that's colorblind. When we just say we want to look at numbers, in a sense, we're colorblind. And, when you look at when you do then take account the race, well, so be it. It is of irrelevance. What is important is the numbers and what is actually going on. So they can stick their racist race card up their ass, because if you pull that, you're being racist to white European Australians.
Absolutely, 100%. And we need to become impervious to this racist label. We need to start to ignore it. if we're ever going to see our country's interests put first. I'm going to dart off soon, guys. Thanks for having me. Before I go, I'd just like to hear.
Yeah, you actually got a super chat. Oh, well, we got a $20
wow.
super chat from fellow Brad, $20.
He's my favorite super chatter.
There you go. And I think
let's go.
He's listening to Johnny speak, and thanks, Johnny. We'll make sure Johnny's going to get a blessing coming from the Dusty Bogan. We'll make sure Johnny gets that $20.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's all good. You keep it. You feed your family, Dusty. It's all right. I don't know if kids yet. But did he have a message on his super chat?
Yeah. It was just like.
Okay. Is it to do with a fart? Is it a fart joke?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's predictable. Look, just to answer that question, fellow comrade, you know, as much as your farts do smell nice, I'm gonna have to pass up on this one offer. Maybe if you send through a $50 super chat, we can see about that. But
yeah, obligatory. I can't even tongue twist the word. Yeah, super chat. Good on you, mate. That's hilarious. We'll take your fun super chats.
I got you, comrade. I got you. Don't worry. It's okay.
Yeah.
Gabe's farting right now. Just to make up
beer. No, that's buying me one beer with the inflation crisis. I've seen someone the other day posted they paid $17 for a schooner in the city. So, I mean, it's atrocious. And every single way you look, this government and the situation Australia is, it's been an absolute failure. Whether it's the price of a beer, you know, housing, homelessness, wages,
not being stabbed in a car park,
crime, so everything they have fucked everything up, to be honest. And I'm going to try.
Well, that's what optimism and sweet dreams gets you. What you know, hoping that things will work out if we're nice enough and just ignore our problems and don't address them gets us, I think. Before I go, I'd just like to ask Gabe, what are your top 10 favorite contributions to Australia by Sudanese Australians?
Oh, well. Sudanese Australians.
There's so many. There's so many of them. That's the thing. It's hard to list. It's hard to pick only 10.
I know. Oh, there's so many musicians. There's so many authors, doctors, surgeons. I can't think of any.
Engineers, lawyers. Yeah.
It's just floating around in my head. I really can't pick one. It's really hard, eh? I don't know about you,
well,
Dusty Bogan.
I think it really counterbalances, you know, all of the negative things is how much positive contributions they make to our country.
Exactly.
And you know, like when you bring, you know, look from the South Sudanese migrants and what they're statistically looking at the crime rate and the glorification. It's obviously they're so retarded and stupid that they glorify the most, I would say, African-American gang rap culture is the most disgusting culture on earth. It's at the top. I consider it the most disgusting culture. And to actually like glorify it, want to then bring that to Australia. And then, you know what? It's like our Indigenous. The thing is, our Indigenous are our Indigenous, and I think we actually do want to see them do a whole lot better, and we don't want to see disgusting culture like this coming in, and it's just it makes it worse for them. Because
and you've really done work to try and help them. No one can accuse you of being heartless, Dusty. You've spent time volunteering, helping Aboriginal youths, and I know African youths as well. So you've really been on the front lines of really trying to help with your own life. You know, you've sacrificed your time, and this is coming from someone who's really an expert on the ground. They're not somebody that's worked in a think tank or has their head in the clouds. You know, they've spent their life memorizing ideology. You've actually been there and done it. So when you're speaking about these topics, you're really speaking with authority on it.
Like for me, the African-American gang rap culture was the most toxic thing I could see. Like I did 2,500 hours over 10 years. Like between me and my wife, it bumps up to 4,000 hours between us, like so much time. And, you know, that one element, the music, the words, there's a big thing in Christian culture about like your words, what you speak has power, and what you then listen to and you're reading and you're watching and you're putting into your mind, it becomes, then you start to speak that out, and then your actions follow. So like it is, everything we consume, you're giving, it will take place in your life essentially. And, I would be absolutely against it with my youth boys and trying to show them, steer them well away from it, point it out to them what's going on, and be like, these people aren't victims, they are criminals, they're disgusting. If you want to ruin your life, you should listen to this music. You should, you know what I mean? And there's so much more positivity that you can do. And even young white Australians can go down the very same path, and it's attached to that. And this is, you can see, I've seen Christian African families that are doctors, the actual doctor lawyer thing, when they actually say that, and then you see the youth, the children who are quite bright as well, but then they go down this dark path. And like, that must be there must be something wrong when it gets to a point of, a statistical nightmare, but reality that we have to be confronted with. Now, in Australia, like if we got to the practical side of things, I think a big part of British culture is the common law. We have to have a common standard. Now, if we say tomorrow, rape, murder, pedophilia is life imprisonment, you get a guilty conviction, life imprisonment for everyone. This is a mandatory minimum sentence. There's no discrimination if we have a common law that in practice is a mandatory minimum sentence. Remove these people from the community. And, this is the situation we're tackling with now in Queensland with the Youth Justice Act that had been, rewritten by the left-wing Labor Party. They went soft on it. They let repeat offenders go on bail. The young, scumbags who murdered Nanna White, they are, this guy was out on three times he'd committed armed robbery essentially and had been out on bail. He was on bail as this happened. So we went to a protest and it was zero tolerance on youth crimes, zero tolerance. And that's what we're saying. We cannot give people second chances on violent crime, because statistically, if you do it once, you'll do it again. And there's a complete disrespect and disregard of law and order. So we have to just bang. It's one rule for all, a common law. And that is what has made, I think, Western British, civilization amazing, was having a common law. We need one standard for all. I
agree. That's among the solutions. I'm going to pop off, but I'll just let everyone know that tomorrow we're going to be releasing an article. It's written by and crafted by a guy who has written for me before. He wrote the article about changing demographics for the National Observer. Flynn Holman, go follow him on X. He's a graduate of mathematics, and he's also done a science degree as well. And he's written up an article that we'll be releasing tomorrow about the differences in crime rates and race and all of these things. And he really dives into depth, and he's visualized it all with graphs and charts. So I encourage everyone to go subscribe to thenationalobserver.co. That's thenationalobserver.co. Make sure you go visit it right now. Otherwise, I'm going to be very unhappy, and Flynn's going to be very unhappy, because this is a massive article. It's taken a long time to write, and I guess it's only a coincidence that lined up with this recent event. But it's very important for everyone to understand and internalize the facts that are included within. Thanks for having me on, Dusty, and thank you for joining us, Gabe, as well. It's good to chat to you now that you're back in the land down under.
Yes,
I'm sure I'm going to host you on the Backbench Drivers podcast next week, which will be, I think, releasing Monday. I intend to release it.
Wonderful.
So everyone go. Also, you can find that at thenationalobserver.co. You subscribe to that. You get all of our articles, all of our podcasts completely free. You're going to love what you see over there. So before I go, maybe I'll throw back to Gabe. Dusty was talking about. Sorry, Dusty, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I've been listening to your podcast, so the Backbencher Driver, and I think I'm listening to it on Spotify, but often at work now. We've become mates. You had me on your podcast. We headed up the Australia month,
which was a great success. We'll bring it back again next year.
It's been a great success. It's going to be an annual tradition. But once I actually started, look, I could be listening to Joe Rogan. I could be listening to anything. Now I'm going and I'm checking out your podcast, mate. And I think people really need to start listening to you. Give them a go, because you'll be surprised. And I guarantee it, once you listen to a podcast, you'll be coming back for more. And, how professional you are, and, great questions. You go, you ask all the right questions. You get all the, the people on there who are interesting and credible. And, I just credit to you, mate. I think you're doing a great job.
I really appreciate it, Dustin. Thank you for joining me for that episode. Thank you for having me on today as well. I really appreciate it. So if anyone wants to, I encourage you all to check out my podcast. I have a great co-host, Matthew. He's always on with me. He's very professional as well. We always try to get the best guests like Dusty and Gabe. I think after that, we've got Dr. Frank Salter of the British Australian community. He's also scheduled in for an episode. So lots of great things on the horizon. Have a great night, guys. And Gabe, I know Dusty was talking about this before. He's talking about the importance of common law. And we've seen the success of people such as, I think his name is Bukele, from El Salvador, I believe it is. And his authoritarian response towards gang crime within his country reduced the crime rate by something like 90%, something absolutely amazing. I know you're very interested in authoritarianism and you're an expert on it. I'll leave you, and maybe you can talk to Dusty and the audience about some of the other solutions that will actually deliver us from this ongoing crime wave.
For sure. No, thanks for joining us. Great talking.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
John.
Cheers, mate.
See ya.
See ya.
Bang. Legend.
Nice.
Here we are. So what do you think, Gabriel? What would be the top of your list of, priority? I always kind of think that, there's two ways we can always discuss policies we would love to implement. And, a lot of people will say, they put the pressure on you, you're the king of Australia. What would you do?
Yep.
Then there's the more realistic, what can we achieve? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But
sure.
what would you do if you're the king? If you were the king right now, major majority, you've got you've got the House and you've got the Senate. Bang.
Yeah, for sure. Before I answer that question, I'd like to just backtrack just a little bit, because there's something I wanted to say in regards to, you're talking about culture, music, and you're also talking about, protecting your own. One thing I don't mean to sidetrack or anything, but I'll get to that. That's a very important question.
No, I think off the heart end is the most important thing, obviously.
Sure.
With whatever we've got, feel like we want to talk about, we got to go for it, mate.
Yeah, of course. No, there were some things I wanted to address. I find that the people that are, I guess, the most annoying to deal with when it comes to migration, I guess you could say the social justice warriors or whatever, fellow Christians that have this. Well, first of all, they misinterpret scripture. They don't know what they're talking about when they're talking about scripture. When, for example, their favorite Bible verse, and I'm paraphrasing here, but is love thy neighbor as thyself, right? And it'll say that we got to love our neighbor as ourselves. We got to bring these people in because they're suffering. And yes, that may be true, but what does love thy neighbor as thyself really mean? What does the word neighbor mean? The word neighbor means someone living next door, someone that's close by. Now, let me ask you this question. This may be for Christians that are, maybe the social justice warriors or whatever. Who's closer? Your white neighbor, your white Australian person, whatever, next door, or someone that's from Africa? Who's closer? Who's your neighbor? Who should he look after first? And I'm not saying not to look after anyone and be selfish, not at all, but there is a priority. You have to look after your own. It's like when you look at race is a family. Race is an extended family. We all share similar characteristics. You look at Englishmen, they share similar characteristics, character traits. Italians, they all talk with, we all talk with our hands. Like it's a common thing. We all share something in common with one big family, and that's what race is. And if you look at a smaller unit, like just a normal family, a mother, father, 3 children, you have a family, Dusty, you would understand. You would prioritize your family above all else, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for real. And like that's how we have to look at race. When you see, white Australians.
Well, when Ireland, with the Conor McGregor thing, and the young some immigrant over there went on a stabbing spree, didn't they? Like seemed like it was one of the refugees, and the Irish had been complaining and protesting, saying this isn't working. We've got Irish people on the streets. You're bringing in more and more refugees, and then the crime rate went up, and there was a stabbing of school children from a refugee, and it blew up. It blew up. Conor McGregor sort of took the charge on that. And, I'm Irish. I'm 75% Irish. Like, both grandparents on mum's side are Irish. Dad's side is his dad's Scottish, and his mum is English and Irish. So we're like majority Irish, you know. Yeah. But I could feel the the rage, the anger, and this frustration. It was quite amazing. And we really need to I think it's a good and passionate and perfectly healthy and normal thing to feel this. Like, probably you get right now you've got we see the Russians and the Ukrainians, or the Palestinians and the Israelis, and they're bombing the shit out of each other, and passionately trying to whatever protest or say their piece. And like, you've got to stand up. You got to stand up. We've got to stand up. We've got to speak up. And we've got to have this. I'm even looking at the current situation, and I'm like, am I like Australia month? We went, we banner dropped, we letterbox dropped, we petitioned, and we went and we made a bit of a coalition of people to talk about January being a month of celebration of Australian culture. But even this local stabbing, it's like, are we going to do banner drops?
Yeah.
Are we gonna start a petition? Are we gonna, because we need to get passionate about it, and we get passionate about our faith, and we get passionate about these things. But like you said, if I'm not passionate about my neighborhood, my town, there's something wrong. There really is something wrong. And we need to reconnect back to, a very healthy way. It's a healthy way to be, and it's a godly way to be.
Yes. Well, that's how God created us. Our human nature is to be very tribal. We are supposed to be, grouped together as one big family, and you see that with all other races. You see that with Asians. You see that with Indians. You see that with Africans. I'm sure you've seen on X or on Twitter, one African guy getting bashed, right? And then you get all these hordes of Africans, or African Americans, whatever, just coming in to help him. Just randos in the street. They're just coming in to help him. They don't probably know the guy. They have no idea. They're just coming in because, the reason why they do that, first of all, it's impulsiveness. But secondly, is their tribal nature. They're seeing one of their own getting bashed and kicked in by maybe someone of another race. And I have seen that. They go and they just get the white guy. Probably the white guy's defending himself, but he's winning. He's punching this singular black guy. But everyone's coming in and they're, working together as a group. You don't see that with, Europeans anymore, with white people. And that ended with, that ended at World War II, because prior to World War II, white people were working together. You had Germany working with Italy, in securing, a perfect society, in their own way, I guess. But like they were working together as a unit against a common enemy, or what they perceive as a common enemy.
Do you think the rise of atheism and the distache from our Christian heritage has been a big part of this? Like, obviously, there's multiple. Maybe our success, like British people, our empire, we looked at as an empire spread across the world, and there was more of an openness to trade and travel, and we were at the pinnacle peak of technology and being able to do all that, and had huge success. And then it's like there's multiple fronts. I do think you did touch on something. You said Christians in their bubble, how they are more accepting. Now, I've noticed this because I've been in the huge Pentecostal churches, thousands and thousands of people in the church congregations, and very multi-ethnic. We're united in our faith, which brings us together in this bond. But I've come to realize that it's a bubble and it's a false sense of reality. Yes. So like it is very true, our experiences, that when you have very passionate Christians, that their behavior is a lot better and they're trying to actively better themselves. But we can't be fooled and into thinking that I know very well that I, a young Celtic British descent, raised low socioeconomic single parent homes, we were very we would be violent, we would be criminal, and we would be up to no good. And it was Christ that changed me as well. And it got me into a whole new community and mindset. But then once you're in that bubble and you forget what the real world's like, you get, so we've got to like really think about that. Like I often think about this, my perfect church with actual African doctors and actual African engineers who are lovely and great people. But, the good thing about the people I'm interact with is they're honest about the situation as well. And they'll self-critique in honesty their own community and the corruption in Africa and the things that need to change. And that they would often as well say that we need to wake up. They'll be the ones saying we need to wake up, because I don't think they know the problems of Africa and they don't want them coming here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I have experienced that myself, actually, because I did grow up in the in a church setting, and I still am, of course, but a more evangelical Protestant type church. And like you said, it was very multicultural, mixture. I grew up with many people from different ethnicities, of course. And like you said, like most of the parents, or the older or the more mature older folk from these minority groups, such as Africans or whatever, right? I have experienced them come to me, or I have heard them say, the youth, our youth, and these are islanders, right? South Pacific Islanders. I have much more experience with them. I can probably talk about it a little bit more when we go into like the whole gang situation that led to this and whatever. But I have heard the parents of these kids talk and complain about, and these are Christians, talk and complain about the violence in their community. And I was listening to this, and I'll look around and I'll see their kids, unfortunately, going down the wrong path. And their parents just didn't seem to notice. Like, I really don't understand. Like, my parents, are white, European. They would notice that something is going wrong, and they will correct me accordingly. And that's why I think most white Europeans come out perfectly fine and well behaved, and because they're corrected. But these people, although they recognize the issue, they struggle to execute a form of punishment against their own, because their own's mucking up, their own selling drugs, they are robbing, they are carjacking. I have witnessed this because I've grown up in that community, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. And
do you think we're like unempowered? You know, the problem with like our left wing soft handling, everyone with cotton gloves and the nanny state is, you know, it's parents feel as this is same with Europeans. Like it's now becoming like, it's spreading. The poison is spreading where parents don't feel like they have the authority to discipline or, you know what I mean? And this would be also a law issue with self-defense. People feel as though they cannot, defend their own, say, their car, their home, themselves. If they witness crime, they feel as though, can I step in and be into the situation? Am I legally protected? If someone disciplines their own child, so there's so many elements. And I do think for Europeans, what has always been important for Europeans, a part of our culture is we've always had the law clearly stating the standard, because what a culture is literally like you have to state the standards. You have to have clear standards at a legal level is how we have operated. So once we start watering that down, it's actually becomes not good for us. So we need to understand how we are. And then we could go as far to say what was really good for us and made us great. If we stick to that, we then can say this could improve the other communities. Do you know what I'm saying? Like this was a part of Western culture, or Christian culture, how we said we are bringing civilization to the world. Now let's not back away from what caused our greatness. Let's embrace what caused our greatness, and that is good, clear, common law, a standard that is clearly put out there in the community, and hold to that, not this watered down soft approach, but clearly have it in the community, a standard from parents, teachers, law enforcement. You have to stick to, you can't let them out on bail. You can't, coppers, a parent kicks a kid up the ass, the copper comes over and shakes the dad's hand and says, well done. Not coming in to give them a rev up because he kicked him up the ass too hard.
Look, that was a lot there. But going back to culture, I mean, look, we have our own culture. We have our own European culture, and our culture is very disciplined. It's very orderly. It's very, I wouldn't say perfect, but looking at the other cultures, it kind of is. Now, these people have their own form of culture, their own expression of their culture and how they express themselves in their day-to-day lives. When they come to a Western society, Australia, UK, Canada, they struggle to express themselves in the appropriate manner because they're not from our society. We have our own society, they have theirs. And I guess we're kind of drifting towards the solution of things, Do these people belong in our society? Is it beneficial to them? Are they better to be with their own people, with their own society? And look, they understand how each other work. Like, I know some guys, I'll be like, I don't want to marry a South Pacific Islander because I know they act like this. I want to marry someone else because they're just annoying. Like, they know how they work. They know each other. They're a family. It's like, I know what my siblings like. It's the same thing. So, like, if they're all together in one spot, isolated from us, because we have our own thing, they have theirs. And that's fine. That's the way I believe God created us. When, at the Tower of Babel, you look at the Tower of Babel, he separated different groups. And today we're seeing this, multicultural agenda defying God's natural law of separation between the races, because there needs to be a separation. It's natural. That's how God intended it at the Tower of Babel. They're breaking that law and bringing everyone together. And what's happening? Grandmas are getting stabbed. 13-year-old girls are getting gang raped. It's a horrible thing. And look, I'll ask you this question. When was the last time you saw a white boy or a European boy, Polish, Italian, whatever,
Oh,
right? English. When was the last time you saw him go and stab a grandmother? Like, I can't think of a time that's ever happened. That's
yeah.
because everyone's different. Everyone expresses themselves differently, and I really do think people will grow and benefit from each other, within their own race, in their own society. That's
It's
what I
definitely
really.
interesting, the point of like the Babylon, and you got to like read the tea leaves and say, like,
Yeah.
have such a significant story handed down through even multiple civilizations, and how important this is, that it has survived and passed on, is like, we can't like ignore that, and we have ignored it. And clearly there's something, we're warned about making a Babylonian society, and that's really what we have. I'm gonna have to actually wrap it up, because my missus, she forgot my laptop charger today and left it at work,
Oh,
and she has to do work on the computer, and my computer's like,
yeah.
it's still got enough on there, but we should wrap it up. So if we do
Okay,
like
sure.
5 more minutes,
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah.
we could have
Yeah.
gone a bit longer, but yeah, it is
Yeah,
what it is.
we're just getting into it. Yeah, that's okay. It's okay.
We
Next
can
time.
definitely go. I'm gonna try to do more live streaming. And last year I did maybe like 8 weeks in a row, like a good run, and I had some regular guests on. And this year, next week, Lent starts on
Yes.
Ash Wednesday I think it was the 14th. It's also Valentine's Day, so I wanted during Lent to continue having people on and continue doing a Thursday show. So I'll definitely have you back on, mate, because I love your honesty. I love the fact that you're, even myself, it's not until we're confronted in our own backyard with these things that we have to really go. Like, for so long, we, hear other people say it and we brush it off, and I have too. And then, I have to, you've actually been a guy who, you'll say it, you'll look at the situation and you'll call it out, which is like, it's great. It's great to be, I think, to normalize when you look at it and you go, these are the facts. We need to change something. Until we honestly look at something, we'll never get a better outcome. And, we have to be realistic about, I do think pepper spray. I think we could legalize pepper spray. We could change. Before we go, a few practical things. I legalize pepper spray.
Yeah.
We need to clearly define the law around like castle doctrine, stand your ground laws. I would even like an idea to start petitioning. An idea that I was going to start petitioning like political parties would be something like, they say about concealed carry. I think we might be fairly far away from that. But imagine if we said off-duty police officers, off-duty soldiers, off-duty armed reservists, retired soldiers, and retired police officers could apply for a concealed carry. They're already trained. They're trustworthy. It's a part of their employment or past employment. And what we could have is 20, 30,000 concealed carries in our community of trustworthy, trained people who, if a situation like this happened, what it would do is criminal people, if we said there are 30, 50,000 concealed carry permits in the community that are trained and will step into a situation, it could be all the difference putting the fear of God into criminals, because they would never know if this old man or old woman or is a veteran or a retired police officer. You'd never know. You don't know who's on the train. You don't know who's at the restaurant. I think it would be a psychological thing we could do. It's something, you know what I mean? But that's all. There's always the idea, I like to say, there's the things we'd like to do if we were the king, and there's the things we have to think about if in the real world and what we could potentially change. We have to come up with ideas. We have to petition political parties, and we have to really we have to see change. I would love to see pepper spray. I think we could get pepper spray. Western Australia has pepper spray. They have a good law that says if you deploy it outside of self-defense, there's $25,000 fine and 2-year prison sentence. But people get it. Like, people can purchase it, they can have it on them, and it's there to use in a self-defense situation.
Yeah, sure. No, I do think that's a great idea, Dusty. But well, short term anyway. Long term, I really do think adopting policies of remigration, back to their places of origin for non-whites, for our own benefit and their own benefit, would be a great way moving forward. And it won't happen overnight. But these people, we're suffering. We lost a wonderful white woman who died in front of her granddaughter by 4 black men, right? We are suffering because of this mistake, of allowing these people in. And they are suffering too. They're not in their natural habitat. And we got to feel sorry for them as Christians. We have to, in the nicest possible way, relieve them of their misery and send them back to the place where their culture will thrive and where they can look after themselves and connect, because that's the way we have been built by God, and that was His intention for us. If we go against that, we are siding with the globalist, and I'll just say the globalist agenda of multiculturalism, which is anti-Christian, anti-God. And as soon as Christians start understanding that and start thinking of these, new policies, such as, the remigration policy and things of that nature, plus, net zero immigration, of course, maybe from a few European countries, but, that's not really up for discussion right now. We're talking about,
we could just
minority groups that are criminals.
We could just let white South African farmers in for let them trickle in for 20 years. And that's the only guys we're going to let in. They're in a horrible situation over there.
I agree with you. Yeah. Something like that, like an emergency.
They can have theirs back. We'll get ours. I think the Greeks and the Turks have done it in the past. So if it's been done in the past, I'm pretty sure the Greeks and the Turks did this. They remigrated. Greeks and Turks went back to the
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that happened for a while. Yeah. But yeah.
So where can people follow you? You're active on Telegram and X, and you've got a show on cozy.tv.
Well, not cozy yet. Well, not yet anyway, but very soon I will be making an announcement about that. But yeah, go and follow me on X at Real Gabriel Mare. You click on my bio, there's a Linktree link. Click on it, and you have my Telegram, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and that sort of thing. So yeah, just follow me on X at Real Gabriel Mare. And yeah, thanks for having me, Dusty. I really do appreciate it. Thanks again.
No worries, mate. I definitely look forward to having you on. And you're always interesting. I know we've had to cut it short. You have had a recent trip to America. You've done a bit of travel. You've always been outspoken. You did stand up and defend the Captain Cook statue. Here's your X. So make sure you go follow. There is your link. I put your X link in the description. So make sure everyone give Gabriel a follow. Big thanks for standing up and to defend the Captain Cook statue. I know they wrote a hit piece about you. Was it The Guardian or someone?
Yeah, two of them actually. Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was news.com.au and the Daily Mail UK. So yeah, pretty big publications there. So quite a success, actually. I mean, any publicity is great. So yeah,
any publicity is great. The boys did a call out next year for Australia Month. The night before Australia Day, everyone's going to have to go to defend the statues because they cut them down. Congratulations. I think it's absolutely brilliant. You've done well. And everyone give the man a follow and stay up to date with what he's up to, because he's an interesting guy and he'll never lie to you. He'll always speak the truth. Thanks, mate, for your time, and we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you, Dusty. Take care. See you, everybody.
You.